Hi, Art Survey. Miss Everson here. I was just going to post a quick video on how to make that saddle stitch journal binding that we did this morning. Just for your reference, if you wanted to make another one or if you missed a step and needed to finish it up, you guys can watch this video if you need to. It may be a long one, so feel free to pause or skip forward to certain parts or whatever. So in your supply bags, you should have had in there two cardboard pieces like this. We're not going to use these for the saddle stitch binding. If you chose to do the Coptic stitch, which is in the slideshow, there's another video that shows how to do that. It's a harder stitch to accomplish, but if you're feeling ambitious, go for it. It's a good thing to learn, and it's a really nice, sturdy, pretty binding. So these we're not going to use for the saddle stitch, so I'm just going to set these aside. You won't need them. Yours might look a little bit different, but it should be like this kind of cardboard feel. Some of them I think are like brown on one side and yellow on the other, matte board. Just set those aside. You don't really need them for this stitch anyway. You also should have gotten 3 different kinds of paper, and they are folded into signatures. So signatures are just like the folds of pages that go into a sketchbook. I gave you 3 different kinds of paper just because of what I had in the classroom to work with. Also, it gives you a little bit of experience working with different types of paper. So since I didn't give you guys like a cover piece of like the mat board or the cardboard for the saddle stitch, I'm going to use the sturdiest paper so you can kind of feel the white paper. There's one group of white paper that's a little bit stiffer, a little bit firmer, and we'll be able to handle a little bit more beating up being on the outside of a journal, being the cover. So that's what I'm going to use for the outside of my journal. If you want something more sturdy like cardboard, go find some cardboard and just measure it out to the open page size. So I would, and you may even want to go like 1/4 of an inch bigger on all sides of the paper. Cut it out, fold it in half. You can take a pencil and poke it through the holes down the center of your cover to mark where you would put the holes to sew it through. So I already punched the holes into the paper for you guys. So I had pieces of paper like this. I folded it in half to get the center line. So if you're doing this on your own, you know how to do this step. So I'm just going to show you quick down here. Pretend these holes aren't here. I'm going to show you how I did it. If you have an awl, that's great. When I did it, I did not have one with me. So I just used a simple nail and a hammer. And I took a ruler down the center of my paper, marked every inch. You can go every 1.5 inches, you can go every 2 inches, whatever you want to do. I did every inch just to make it nice and sturdy. Wherever you marked your hole, put your nail and hammer through your paper. It's pretty easy. It's not hard to get through this paper. Just make sure that you have a board that you can nail into underneath it so you're not nailing into your dining room table or something and causing problems. So I'm going to take the stiffer paper. I'm going to open it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the next signature of paper and I'm going to open that one up. Make sure that the holes line up. There does seem to be a top and a bottom to these papers where the hole is closer to the top on one end than it is on the other. So this looks like it lines up pretty good. You can see the holes there. If I flipped it, the holes are off quite a bit. So you want to make sure that your holes line up really good. So just make sure that when you are taking your signatures and unfolding them, that the holes match up. So I'm going to open that up. So now I've got 2 signatures unfolded at the center, so they lay on top of each other like one pile. Same thing with this one. I'm going to put this guy in the center. So if I look at where the hole is here, I can see this hole is actually lower. The hole in this brown paper is lower than the white paper, so I must have to flip it. So I measured these and stamped them all together. So they should line up relatively well. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure it's as close as possible. So there you can see the 2 holes line up once they're at the top. So I'm going to unfold those pages. Now I've got all of my pages in one big pile. The hole should be lined up and ready to be sewn up. So now we're going to talk about what else we got in our supply bag. You should have gotten 10 feet of string. I gave you guys white cotton string. This is some sort of twine. It's just what I had in the classroom. And you also should have gotten this needle, which I put in a piece of cardboard, so it was harder for you guys to lose. We do need these. We do need these back at the end of the semester. So when you're done using it, just make sure you put it back in the cardboard so that you don't drop it and lose it, or it's just easier to find it if you have it tucked in here, and then you don't end up stepping on it and stabbing yourself on accident somehow. And then for the string, I put in 10 feet because if you chose to do the Coptic stitch, you need a lot of string. For the saddle stitch, which we are doing here, you do not need that much string. So if you don't want to be fighting with that much string and tangles and all that kind of stuff, which you're going to run into anyway, but if you want to do it less, I would probably just take like an arm's length off of it. So just cut, just measure out, take an end, stretch your arms out, and cut off that little bit. It's like right here, and then get rid of it. I already did that, so I'm not going to do it again because otherwise I'll run out of string. So I am going to now thread my needle. So I gave you guys really big needles, so they should be really easy to thread, and they're not real sharp, so they shouldn't be, you won't come out of here needing thimbles or anything. So if you have a piece of string that's really frayed, you can just take some scissors and kind of trim it off to make it easier to go into your needle. If you need to, you can also get this a little bit wet, twist it again, and then push it through the eye of the needle. Okay? So once you get it going through, I like to I'm going to double up my string so it's extra strong. So I'm going to, once I get it through the needle a little bit so it's not going to fall off of my string, I'm going to take my one end, I'm going to find the other end. Excuse me. There's a knot in here, so I'm just going to take that out. All right, so I've got my other end, the one that I put through the needle. I'm going to line them up just like so, and then I'm going to kind of pull it straight. And then I kind of run into my needle, but I want to make sure my needle gets to the center of my string, so I'm going to pull it as far as I can until it comes to the end. So again, if I go back here and see that my strings are relatively lined up, I can just pull it, and I will eventually get to the center of my string, which is where my needle is. Okay? So now that you've got the amount of string you need and it's on your needle, we're going to tie a knot. So for this, I like to just make a loop and pull it through. So I'll do that one more time just so you guys can see. I've got my ends here. I'm going to loop it around and then pull those two ends through the center just to make a good knot. And that is going to prevent it from pulling through the holes in my signatures. Just keep it nice and sturdy. All right, so let's get you guys looking down here. So I am going to start on the outside of my journal, so the cover. So that way the knot on the end will be on the outside of my journal instead of on the inside. So first I'm going to go through and put it through the first signature, find the hole in the second signature, and then the third, so that you are going through all layers of pages. And what I'm going to do is pull my string all the way through until it gets to that knot. So you can see the knot stopped right there. And my string is now on the inside of my journal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the next hole. And for the first couple of holes, it might take a little finagling to get it through all of your signatures. Eventually it'll kind of line up and it'll be easier. But for the first couple of times, you might have to do this kind of thing where you put it through the hole of the first signature and then you kind of have to find it in the second signature and the third just to make sure it gets all the way through. And then I'm going to pull it through. And sometimes you get that. So you got to make sure you double check, kind of look inside your pages, make sure untangle any little messes that happen on the inside, and then pull your stitch nice and tight. All right, so now my string is again on the outside cover of my journal. So I am going to keep doing this until I get to the end here. So again, kind of have to look through my pages, make sure I'm lining it all up just right. And start pulling it through. Take out the tangled mess. If you notice that any stitches are loose, like if this was loose, all I would have to do is go around to the other side, kind of pull it tight again, and then kind of pull it through to the next stitch so it gets nice and tight. So this is just going to continue all the way down this row. So again, through here. Now it's starting to line up a little easier. I can just pull my needle right through. And I am going to continue to the next hole. Like so. And just keep going all the way down until you get to here. All right, so now you can see that I have sewn my first row all the way down to the last stitch on that one side. So this is where I started, and I went every hole until I got all the way down to the bottom. So now what we're going to do is we are going to double back and fill in these gaps in between each stitch. So it will be stitches all the way along the binding. There won't be any gaps in between. So to do that, we are going to use the same holes that we used for the other stitches. So this is where I left off. I'm going to come back through the same hole as this stitch. And pull it through here. So that when I pull that through, you can see those two stitches kind of line up and there's no gap left anymore. So we come on to the other side, same thing, go into the hole of the stitch before it, pull it through nice and tight, and again, we're starting to lose those gaps. It's a nice line of binding, no gaps in between. So we're just going to continue that all the way through. We'll go to the next hole. Pull it through nice and tight. Once you get into a rhythm, it's pretty easy. This is probably the easiest part. That double back, you already have the hole punched through. So just keeping it going all the way to the end. Checking back to make sure they don't have any loose strings. You can see this one's kind of loose. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to kind of pull it tight. Whatever it is I need to pull. So I need to pull here in order to pull that stitch nice and tight again. So I'm almost to the last one here. I'll show you guys how to tie it off. And then you will have your own homemade journal, which will save you a lot of money. You can use any kind of paper. You can use copier paper. You'll make a smaller journal, but that's okay. Small ones are nice and easy to throw into a bag or take with you places. So I come back here. This looks a little loose, so I need to pull my strings a little tighter. So now I've got my binding that goes all the way down the journal and all the way up on the inside. So it stops on the inside. What I'm going to do, see if I can get you guys a little closer here, to tie it off, is I've got my needle. I'm going to go underneath that last stitch And when I'm pulling it through, I'm going to keep this loop. See how that made a loop? I'm going to tie the knot through there and then pull it tight. And that makes a knot around that last stitch there. And then you can either cut it really long to act as a bookmark, or you can just cut it really short and just kind of let it be. So now we have your saddle stitch journal. Now when you put it in your backpack or under a bunch of books, it'll flatten out really nice. But you've now got a whole book to use for your semester. I hope that was relatively painless. But yeah, you should be good for the semester. All right. And if you need more pages, just make another book. All right. Great. Have a good one.